Hello and welcome to this edition of the Rest is Entertainment Questions and Answers episode. I'm Marina Hyde.
And I'm Richard Osman. Hi, Marina.
How are you?
Yeah, I'm very well. We got lots of lovely questions from our listeners today. Also, I should say, we have our most famous questioner ever.
An absolute hero to both of us has sent in a question.
An absolute hero has a question for us, which we're going to do everything we can to answer. Should we just kick straight off?
Please do. Please do.
I have a question from Richard Gosler. Or Gosler. I'm going to say Gosler. Dickie G asks this. He said, I've watched Wild Oats on Netflix. Oh, I haven't. Which has a quite frankly ridiculous number of producers and exec producers. So my question is, how many of those are actual producers and how many are just on a percentage?
Richard, both Richards. Unbelievably, I have seen this movie. And by the way, about 5 people have, which is part of the problem here, and we'll come to that. There are 72 producers, executive producers, and associate producers listed on Wild Oats' IMDb. By the way, if you haven't seen it, well, first of all, don't. Shirley MacLaine and Jessica Lange, Demi Moore's got a bit in it, Alan Arkin. They get more money in some form of legacy than they, by the way, I haven't watched it for a while, and they end up going to Tenerife to sow their wild oats, etc., etc. Now, I think that took 40k in the opening box office, which, bear in mind, it took about 4 years to get to screen. This tells you all the stories. Now, you're asking me if some of them are on a percentage. They are on a percentage of the loss, okay? That some people are being paid on those producer credits, and some people are paying to be a part of a film that is losing a lot of money. I think the production of it took a long time. It was very, very stop-start. So you got actors coming on and off the project, but all of that period costs money. So what would have happened here, it's not some big studio film. It needs constant little cash injections all the time. And probably what they did was say, you'll have a credit, you'll be an executive producer. I mean, when you got that many, you can see that there's been quite a problem. I should also say that, as we've said before, that sometimes you can be called an executive producer on a show and it just means writer. And sometimes you can be called other types of producer and it means something different. Not very many of those people are actually sourcing all sorts of important things for the production, working as a kind of line producer. I think it was supposed to be in Vegas and it ended up in the Canary Islands.
Wow.
For tax reasons.
Yeah, that tells the story.
So that would have been another few rewrites. And you're pretty sure that any WGA writers would be like, okay, I've done an entire movie about Las Vegas and people going to Vegas. I can't really repurpose it immediately for Gran Canaria. I'm sorry. Someone else is going to have to come
Amateurs. I could do that. Probably
it would have been negotiated that their name remained on the project. So this is how it builds up. 72 is some kind of a record. So I think that you might be, I don't want to say that is the record, but it will be close to the record. You would never get that on any big studio thing because they don't have to have that. As things go wrong, you will find that more and more producers may come on. And what it often means is that they are bringing money of some sort, one sort or another, and their credit as an executive producer or an associate producer or whatever is purely vanity, and it might be, it will probably be related, the rank of it, to how much they put in. But in this case, they took absolutely nothing out. I looked this up and it made something like 250k worldwide, wow. Which, bear in mind how many years it took to do and the talent involved and the sheer number of producers. Nobody took any money out of that movie.
So ironically, a film about making more money than you think you're going to make made an awful lot less money than people thought it was going to make.
But had so many more producers than they thought they were going to include. So yes.
Yes, 72 is very different to a normal thing where you might have 10 and you will get, the head of the various different financing companies will be an exec producer. There'll be a creative exec producer. Perhaps someone from the agency of the main actors might be an exec producer. So there'll be various people whose deal means they're an exec producer, which is how you can get up to 12, 15 or something like that. If it's 72, it's essentially like crowdfunding, right?
And it's like advertising your failure.
So you'll get your name at the front of a book. And on this, they've said, if you give us, $5,000, you'll get your name on the film, and 72 people, or let's say 60 of those 72 people have just done that and have spent an awful lot of money to get their name in the front of a film that no one ever saw.
I wonder, Richard Gosler, having seen it, whether you think they should have paid to take their name off, because I'm afraid I would wish my name to be removed from that particular project.
Yeah, imagine how many there would have been before that. But also it's quite a good way, that's 72 people who presumably would have gone to see the movie as well.
Which is a huge part of its box office. But I think what you have to do at the first screening is say, okay, now you've seen it, you all paid to get on. Who wants to kick in to have their name taken off this project? And then you could have raised more money to get things back. Oh, here's a good one for you, Richard. Greatest hits. Kevin Hamilton would like to know what makes an artist release a greatest hits compilation. There are some notable artists like Iron Maiden who've never done a greatest hits or best of. I've always imagined the reason for this is some notion of not wanting to sell out. Is there a negative connotation with releasing an album like this? And why do some bands not do it?
Yeah, I mean, almost all bands do it. And if the bands don't do it, then the record company who owns the rights to the songs will do it instead. Yeah, bands, I think, albums were so fetishized, weren't they, in the 60s, 70s, and 80s, that this idea that a band would be on an odyssey and come into the studio and create like the perfect work of art, and this is how they want to be judged. But I'm afraid I'm with Alan Partridge on this when they said, what's the best ever Beatles album? And he says, the best of the Beatles, because of course it is, because that's all their best songs. Listen, it's lovely, the idea that, people went in and, created some extraordinary thing, but they were all on drugs at the time. And no, come on. It's the singles. That's the stuff that we want to hear. So I love a greatest hits album.
Doesn't it make you slightly feel it's like lifetime achievement, though? And that's what people always feel like, oh, no, but we're still going to do more.
Well, no, because it's just a way of repackaging the songs you've already got. Now, of course, greatest hits are very much out of favour now because you don't need them, because, the Spotifys of this world, you don't need a Taylor Swift greatest hits because it's all there for you in, various playlists. But if you're a record company, it's just an easy way just to get a little bit of an extra boost for one of your artists. So if they're slightly kind of flagging, or as often happens with bands, and this is when greatest hits usually come out, a band has said, yeah, we'll give you an album in 2 years' time, and 3 years later there's still nothing, and they're on Mystique in some studio, and you've heard the demos of the kind of songs, and they're no good, so you're not getting anything for another 3 years, you're not making another penny out of this act. And that's the point where a record company go, why don't we do a greatest hits? Certain bands would, of course, say, we'll never do a greatest hits. And they go, well, why don't we do a live album? And maybe they'll do that. But greatest hits are the things that make money. Some bands haven't done them. Metallica didn't do greatest hits, AC/DC. So like with Iron Maiden, there's a kind of a heavy metal thing of saying we're not going to do it. Coldplay have never done it, funnily enough.
I feel that they would think our best music is ahead of us or something.
Well, no, Coldplay the opposite. Coldplay said they're not recording new music. They've done a Billy Joel essentially. They said no one wants to hear our new stuff. We're a legacy band now. We're a heritage band, so we're just playing the hits. But they haven't actually done a greatest hits, and there's no need to now. Coldplay don't need the extra publicity of a greatest hits. Cut to, they have a greatest hits out for Christmas. Bands like Radiohead, you wouldn't think have a greatest hits. They did have a greatest hits, but again, that was the record company. So the record company they were with for their first 6 albums, they left when they, became this sort of alt-rock group, and the record company said, well, we're going to do the Radiohead, the singles, and Radiohead were furious about it. All you have to do is look at the top 100 albums in the chart at the moment, and you'll know why people release greatest hits, because don't forget, by and large, this is not costing the record company very much money. It costs them distribution money, packaging money, marketing money, stuff like that. But the stuff has already been recorded. It's already there. And it's the most popular songs by that particular group. And in the top 100 at the moment, and you'll hear how many heritage acts there are in this, we have greatest hits from Elton John, Queen, ABBA, Fleetwood Mac, Eminem, Michael Jackson, Oasis, Linkin Park, Bob Marley, Maroon 5, Elvis, Green Day, The Beatles, Red Hot Chili Peppers, 50 Cent, George Michael, David Bowie, Pitbull, Billy Joel, Whitney Houston, Foo Fighters, Britney Spears, The Killers, The Rolling Stones, Blink-182, Phil Collins, Celine Dion, The Weeknd, and The Smiths are all in the charts at the moment. There's albums there that came out 10, 20, 25 years ago that are still making money for record companies. They're still making money for the artists as well. So it's one of those things where it's sort of a no-brainer, unless you have an act who is absolutely strongly against it, which I would say is just for cultural reasons these days. That's an old thing, not wanting your stuff repackaged in that way. There is absolutely no argument about releasing the greatest hits. And also, if you want to find an old band, listen to the greatest hits first, right? If you want to say, if you wanted to say to somebody, I tell you who you'd love, Billy Joel, then play them the greatest hits. They can do the deep dive into, all the albums and stuff like that. But as an introduction to a band, an introduction to a band's back catalogue, the greatest hits is, of course, the way to go. So it's just one of those things that makes such utter financial, creative, commercial sense that people will be doing it, that people have done it forever. As I say, I think now its glory time has passed because there's a million different ways to kind of launch different bits of different acts' careers, and Spotify has really taken over all of that. But for a certain generation of bands, the greatest hits are just kind of the perfect marketing tool.
This episode is brought to you by Sky, proud partners of The Rest is Entertainment, where you can watch unmissable shows, including The Penguin, starring Academy Award nominee Colin Farrell.
I know. Now, Colin Farrell was the Penguin in the Batman movie, and genuinely you wouldn't have a clue it was him.
It really shows the magical power of makeup and prosthetics.
Incredible performance. Now, in this story, Gotham City is in ruin, in total chaos. The Penguin, aka Oscorp, is out to fill the power vacuum in the city and take control of its criminal underworld. Come on, man.
Not only does it star Colin Farrell, there was a return for Kristen Milioti.
Oh, I like her.
Yeah, she plays Sophia Falcone, the daughter of the Penguin's former boss. You might have seen Kristen in The Wolf of Wall Street.
Brilliant cast.
And great world building. Tense, violent, dark, always darker and grittier. The show looks like everything we got on The Batman, and then it kicks it up a notch.
Now, in this 8-part series, it goes deeper into the dark depths of Gotham's criminal underworld, and we'll get to see how it all plays out.
The Penguin, on Sky from the 20th of September.
Marina, John Saunders has a question for you. Well, I guess for both of us, but John, it's going to Marina. I hope that's okay. Do you know what? I think John would be okay with that. If we'd given John the choice of who to answer, I bet he'd go, do you know what, Richard? I like you. Let's have Marina. John asks, why do some actors suffer from typecasting while others do not? Is it even a real thing, or just something that agents say to actors to be kinder to them when they're not getting the roles?
In some ways, I sort of feel that typecasting is almost when movie acting is working perfectly. This is why the studios, when they were great big factories right back in the day when they owned all the stars, put them again and again, and they always played versions of their personas. But even since that's been broken out of, all the big stars, the big movie stars, play, I think, a version of their persona. So in a way, you're always being typecast. Your agent is doing a good job if there's a specific type that you play, and they're getting you those roles, and the audience then turns out because they like seeing that thing. And there's no argument, as far as I'm concerned. The biggest stars in the world play those same versions again and again. You know, you've got someone like Julia Roberts, where there's going to be humor, but there's going to be lots of pluck, but there's also going to be vulnerability. But she's always going to be a sort of contemporary woman.
Yeah, Tom Hanks. There's going to be a fundamental decency, whatever situation he's in, whatever the stress he's under, is what happens to a man like Tom Hanks in this situation.
Yeah, he's getting you back from the moon, or he's that pilot who has to land on the Hudson, Sully, who's a real life story.
He's a real jinx, Tom Hanks, isn't he?
Yeah, just don't have him on your aircraft, on your craft.
Captain Phillips.
God, yeah.
My God, don't literally, yeah. Listen,
but I tell you what, he'll get you out of it too. So that's the point.
Yeah, that's true.
But there's this idea of the persona, I think, is so important, because even though you see it obviously today, you see someone like Jenna Ortega, who's, she's played that type in Wednesday. She's now playing it in Beetlejuice with Winona Ryder, who's her sort of ancestor in that type of gothic persona. She'll have to deviate it from it a bit, Jenna Ortega, or else she really will be just playing these kind of weird little gothic princesses. But that's not going to. All of these people are playing versions of the same character. So I think that typecasting is actually a good thing when it works. Different for character actors, where you feel that you could see them play anything and you kind of want to know. But for leading actors and actresses, you want to see them in these same situations. Then there's a wonderful writer about movies called Janine Bassinger, and I urge you to seek out her books. But she wrote a really great oral history of Hollywood recently, and she said something about Nicole Kidman, for instance. She said that Nicole Kidman and Robert Redford both play similar characters, in that their characters never reveal all their secrets. There's just little things like that you think, yes, there is always something sort of kept back about her, and there's something kept back about Robert Redford. And you want to go out and see those things. So in some ways, it's working best when you feel typecast. If you do, as I say, if Jenna Ortega then plays another gothic princess after this, then I think you're getting too tight into it. But she will take that energy and she'll do something slightly different. She'll maybe do some sort of, some kind of more updated modern thing. But you'll see her, but she will still indisputably be Jenna Ortega. And every now and then people kind of break out. Someone like Matthew McConaughey, obviously, he started in lots of rom-coms and now is doing much more sort of what we might call interesting work and is obviously enjoying it. I slightly feel that, as I probably discussed here before, that Ryan Gosling is going the other way, where he started in sort of movies, interesting things like Drive and Blue Valentine, and now he sort of keeps playing a sort of version of Ken. So I'd kind of like to see him go back to that earlier version of the persona. But yes, I think typecasting I think it happens for a reason, and it is very, very successful. And even when stars broke out of the control of the studios and thought, well, we don't have to, we're not owned anymore and we can take the roles we like, the ones that work best always played a sort of version of the same screen persona.
That's such an interesting question, and it's not something I've thought of before. And in terms of where it comes from, is that thing, if you're casting a movie, or if you've written a script and you're casting it, now what are you thinking? You're thinking, okay, is the person the correct age for this character? Is it within the realms of possibility that physically they might resemble this character in some way? But what you're mainly thinking is, what is the energy of this actor? Because I know what the energy of the character is, and I know I want it to be a decent, stand-up human being, whatever happens. So let's go to Tom Hanks, because that's a decent stand-up human being. There are archetypes, and that's how you cast a movie. You put them in, and then, of course, you can cast against type. So Anthony Hopkins as Hannibal Lecter, coming off the back of various things where he was in very posh English films, sort of casting against type, but you can't cast against type if you don't have a type.
But what you'd have been saying, nonetheless, with Anthony Hopkins is, he's got that precision, he's got that that sense of total self-control. So that's what the casting agents say. You're using those kind of abstract nouns, but you're saying he's got that X for Y or whatever, and you will find that those are they run like a sort of golden thread through these people's careers, and it makes you think of them when those roles come up.
But also, say with Hanks being likable, one of the hardest things to do is cast likability. So if you write a character and you want people to feel warm towards that character and you want them to bring a certain sort of sense of serenity to a role, then that's quite hard to act. For a fact that if Tom Hanks does it, you're going to get it. And so, of course, you go to Tom Hanks before you go to anyone else, and then you go to a sort of a second-rate Tom Hanks. But yeah, to bringing something that the audience already knows does a lot of the writer's job for them. And the writer, by the way, has already done that job. But to hammer it home, having an actor has already done this and already has that energy is incredibly useful. And I guess that's why people get typecast, because they do things incredibly well, and audiences like them doing it.
And it's why a lot of writers might write with someone, a fantasy star in mind, that they feel for the role, because they've so successfully communicated that persona to you. You feel so well as you know them in that role, that it really helps when you're trying to conceive of the characters, to help them to cohere, to think of someone who you probably will never be able to cast playing them. But this is why you're going to get I'm always interested who they get to narrate those big IMAX movies, and they'll have, Tom Cruise will do the International Space Station. If there's some story about America and how you'll want Tom Hanks to do it, because he says certain things, just the mere sound of his voice after a while, it's almost Pavlovian. You're already associating those qualities from their screen persona with what they're about to say. And so there's a sort of flywheel effect to it anyway, which is that those roles start coming to them anyway.
Morgan Freeman.
Yeah.
Wisdom of the ages.
Of course. Well, that's what he said, that voiceover in Shawshank just gave him an entire career suddenly.
Marina, we have a person we're both huge fans of, has a question for us.
Marina, Richard, Paris. I'm Russell T Davis, and I've worked in television for 500 years, and I need your help. At the end of Celebrity Race Across the World, they've started to credit the typeface. What? Is that a thing? Since when did we credit the typeface? Have we got to do that now? Go and have a look. It says graphic typeface, inverted commas, evil empire, close inverted commas, by Top Wonders, CC-BY 4.0. In the credits, scrolling in the credits. Is that a thing? What's happened? Why has that happened? How has that happened? Help me. You're my only hope. This is my only holiday in 14 years, so I'm going now. Thank you.
Russell T Davis.
Russell T Davis. This truly is a genuine massive honour. He's given me more delight than almost anyone working in television. What a star.
The T stands for trivia.
Yeah.
Listen, I'm a huge fan of Russell's work, and just when you think of the worlds that he creates and these extraordinary characters and the extraordinary emotions and the broad sweeps of history that he's able to sort of just conjure up in just a line, and he's asking us a question about a font. Come on, man. Listen, we're going to answer it, because imagine if we say to Russell T Davies, no, do you know what? It's not. This is beneath us. But it isn't, because very, very little is beneath us.
Very important that nothing's beneath us.
Exactly. So I got in touch with the, by the way, loving Celebrity Race Across the World. If you're not watching it, it's one of those shows that can really handle a celeb edition, and people really open up on it, because it's fascinating, that thing of people tend to get much more honest when they've just got off a 16-hour bus, and there's a camera on them, and they can just go, do you know what? About my husband, he's an idiot. But it's lovely, and there's lots of, and a beautiful relationship between Jeff Brazier and his son, and there's lots of really, really lovely things. But what there also is an amazing font, sort of like a Wild West type font. And I spoke to one of the gang behind Celeb Race Across the World, and I have an answer. I'm going to tell you now, it is not an exciting answer. Will you forgive me? The answer is, this is a direct quote, the reason is, it is a rather prosaic term of the license for the font we use all over the show. Probably was to save money at some point. Credits being free. And the credits being free is the interesting part of that, which is, some people, if they do something for you, want money, and some people want credits, and then you'll always give them credit. That's why there's 72 producers on that Wild Oats movie, because it's easier to give someone a credit than to give them money. But the font is amazing. So yeah, as Russell said, it is the Evil Empire typeface by Top Wanderers, one of my favorite non-league football teams. But it's one of those things that they loved it. They wanted it. Of course, it's owned by somebody, so you have to, get the rights to it. And part of getting the rights is to give it a credit. Do you think Russell T Davies will be happy with that answer, Marina?
I think he will, but I have to say that crediting people for those things, I always think that, first of all, other designers like it because they say, what is that? I want to use that. And I think he makes this font available for free as well, which is what a lot of typeface designers do, because it's quite hard in the days of computers now to stop everything. But it's really interesting. In books, they often tell you the typeface, and there's a whole sort of little bit on it, and it says this book has been created with this and that. And it's called the colophon. That's COLOPHON, the colophon.
Colophon?
That dates all the way back to classical antiquity, when people used to have to write everything out by hand, scribes, and you would be able to say, you'd have your own personalized sign off, and it would say something like "finished, thank God my weary hand is done," or whatever it was. And it was a way of getting your name out there. And the thing, it is a form, obviously it's being given a credit, it's a form of credit, but it's a little bit, it's a big part of it's part of the furniture of the show. And I do think when you see those things, there's lots of little below the line jobs that lots of people might say, well, who cares who did the hair? Well, a lot of people care who did the hair, and it's part of the craft, and it's part of all those people below the line that, obviously Russell knows, who make the television show. So I slightly feel that the way they do it in the books, when it becomes quite indivisible from that sort of the way you perceive the show and the furniture and where they're telling you where they're getting to, then I personally think it deserves its credit.
It's interesting. I think that Russell will be less impressed with me saying it's a rather prosaic term of the license for the font, and more impressed by you talking about colophons.
Colophons.
I think do you know what? I think we really pulled that back from the brink.
Well, I don't, but there are other iconic fonts, and there are other ones that, we love.
There's iconic fonts for sure.
And that we love to hate as well. I read a really interesting interview not that long ago with a guy who did, and it's an old interview with someone like the New York Times or the Washington Post or something, about that guy, the guy who created Comic Sans, and he'd been working at Microsoft, and he had to sort of come up with some sort of basic version of the font that had been in, comic book bubbles, basically, when people were talking, whatever, and he thought, I can't copy it exactly. So he did a version of it, and he's seen as it kind of progressed, and you now see sort of people being given their bowel cancer announcement in it, and they're this, and he's like, what the hell? What have I created? He truly believes he created a monster, and he didn't mean to at all. He was just trying to sort of create a sort of generic jolly font, and he just didn't realize how ubiquitous and how inappropriately it would end up being used in multiple examples every day, and it sort of became the world's most detested typeface. So I'm very glad the Evil Empire is is not the world's most detested typeface, but I'm sorry for the Comic Sans guy because I don't think he meant to do what he did. And that guy's name is Vincent Conner. And this font, Comic Sans, actually teachers use it all the time because apparently it's the most easy font for dyslexic children to read. So even though people think he created a monster, he did something great in lots of other ways. But, you know, it has rather run away from him.
And he was the inspiration for Con Air as well, the film. There's someone who gets typecast, Nicolas Cage.
Well, he plays Nicolas Cage.
Yeah.
He plays Nicolas Cage playing the character.
Yeah, he's not playing.
He's always at one remove.
Lonely Nun anytime soon, is he?
No. Nicolas Cage is Lonely Nun. You know you're going to see that next year.
So here is my reply from someone very high up on Celeb Race across the world. Listen, Russell, don't shoot the messenger. It is a rather prosaic term of the license for the font we use all over the show. The font is free, so this is for us to save money because credits are free. So the font is free, but you have to essentially credit it if you want to use it. And it's a great advert for the font because it looks amazing. So hopefully Evil Empire is going to make a bit of money off getting that credit. Ingrid was once flying to Germany and got talking to the guy next to her who turned out to be a guy called Eric Spiekermann, who's one of the greatest font designers of all time, and we used one of his unique fonts for our wedding invite in the end because they got along famously. We went and met up with him in Berlin recently, so that was lovely. He does incredible. His entire workshop is like just covered in these extraordinary fonts. It's like a medieval cathedral. So that's a font joke.
Yeah.
I
like your font joke.
Yeah,
I like your font joke.
Yeah, I got it. Yeah, I actually got it. Do you know what? The lack of laughter was not me going, that is beyond me. It's actually too clever for me, that joke.
Your font joke was too good for me.
Yeah.
Yeah, typefaces they're a big part of the craft.
So if anyone else wants to, if Schwarzenegger or Camilla want to send in questions, we'd love to hear them.
If I want one from Steven Seagal, I will retire when I get one from Steven Seagal. I don't think he can't be bought.
Yeah.
Except by Putin.
For me, John Virgo, who also can't be bought except for by Putin.
Yeah.
Putin, in fact. Marina, one for you. Sean Flanagan asks, do you know what? I just looked at the question. He is so right about this. Sean asks, why, when all episodes are available for a series, do they have a thumbnail of that episode next to the synopsis? It is especially infuriating when the previous episode is left on a cliffhanger, say a death or disappearance, only for them to be in there for you to see before the start of the next one. Yes, Sean.
My God, Sean, I couldn't agree more with you. I'm delighted. I'm surprised to tell you I've made a rare foray into service journalism, and I'm delighted to be able to give you some information and then some good news. Okay, yes. Right. We're talking about Netflix here, and for Netflix's thumbnails are all AI generated. They've got this incredibly sophisticated tool, which is called something aesthetic visual analysis. Now, all of the thumbnails you see on Netflix, by the way, are tailored to you individually. Mm-hmm. They've got many, many different ways of showing you a show. So say it's like Stranger Things, and the thumbnail for you, if they see that you watch a lot of romantic comedies, they'll have a picture of like Grace and Hopper, Winona Ryder and David Harbour. So it will look like it's that sort of show. If you like comedies, then they'll have all the kids dressed up in their Ghostbusters Halloween costumes. Every single person, is getting a tailored version of thumbnails. Now, what you're talking about is the episodic thumbnails, which I so agree drive you absolutely mad.
I saw one, for example, on Prime Suspect the other. We were rewatching Prime Suspect, and at the end of one is this guy going to get arrested? And the thumbnail for the second episode was the guy in court. And you're like, come on.
There is something you can do about this. In your settings, you can, first of all, you can turn off autoplay previews so you don't see those things of the sort of coming ups and what have you. We scream in our house the whole time, don't watch the coming up, don't watch the coming up.
Not next time, we say in my house. Not next time.
Not next time. So you can turn off that, but most crucially, you can use the no spoilers extension, which covers up all episodic thumbnails.
Get out of town.
Actually, Sean, you never need to see them again. And I didn't know this, and I'm very glad you asked this question because I've now found this out because it drives me absolutely mad. So thank you for asking that. Please expect sort of normal no service journalism to resume very shortly.
Where do you get that? Where in your settings is that?
It's in your account settings.
In your account settings, no spoilers. By the way, can I also say, someone is welcome to ask this as a question, please, for the love of God, when I start a new show, tell me how many episodes there are. Don't make me Google how many. Just say episode 1 of 6, just so I know. I cannot stand watching the first episode of something not knowing if it's a 2-parter, a 3-parter, or a 6-parter.
I couldn't agree more. It's a bit much like what we were saying the other week about books, and you obviously want to know where you are in the book. Otherwise, lots of things don't make sense to you.
Anyway, thank you, Sean.
Thank you very much for that. Now, Richard, I don't want you to mess this one up because it's a top 3.
Fine. We haven't done the top 3 for ages.
We haven't. I think they pretty much retired the show when I stopped doing it, but okay, fine.
You broke the format, but it's coming back.
You think you can step into these shoes? Let's see. Christopher Green would like to ask you, what are your top 3 Britpop bands that are not Oasis?
Well, listen, you don't need on Oasis because they would not be in my top 3 Britpop bands. My top 3 Britpop bands. Number 7. No, I jest. Number 3. Should I be controversial? I probably shouldn't I? So I was really around right in the middle of Britpop because of my brother, and I lived in Camden, and it was all happening at that time, and it was such a great laugh, and I knew lots of the people that asked, yeah, listen, this is difficult. This is a tricky one. So forget Oasis because I wasn't going to have them in the top 3 anyway. So from that statement, we get rid of except Suede because of course they're my number 1 by a million billion miles.
Have you just said your number 1 now?
No, Marina. You honestly, just occasionally, just listen. I was saying, can we sub out Suede? Okay, because I can't do a top 3. They were, of course, going to be my number 1 because they've been a huge part of my life.
We'll assume this is a top 4, but yes, fine.
And they were also the best band in Britpop, so it's like it's sort of
right.
moot anyway. So okay, top 3, let's do it. Number 3, I am going to say Shed 7. Love Shed 7.
Yeah.
Love Shed 7 so much. Again, we talked about greatest hits. Shed 7's greatest hits. Yes, please. I mean, that's a record that keeps on giving, and they're still going now. I think they're on Radio 2 in the park this weekend. Shed 7, them, the Sugar Babes. It all comes around. The original Sugar Babes as well. They're back.
That does come around.
Yeah. Number 3, I will say Shed 7. Number 2, I'm going to say Elastica. Absolutely love Elastica.
I knew you'd say Elastica.
Yeah. And I love everyone in Elastica. They were so cool.
Yeah,
I mean, insanely cool. That first album was just like nothing that had come before, apart from the theme tune to Are You Being Served, which is very similar to. But listen, it's good, the theme tune to Are You Being Served. So number 2, Elastica. So we're not having Suede. So number 1, it has to be. The answer to the question, who do you prefer, Blur or Oasis, is always the same, which is Pulp. I mean, how could you not? So I'm going to go Shed 7, 3, Elastica 2, and Pulp number 1. Again, a band that started such a long time before Britpop. That's what people forget about Pulp. They were around in 85, a sort of slightly difficult arty student-y band from Sheffield, and Britpop came along at a time when really they should have just been sort of giving up and thinking, this is never going to work for us. And just something about their incredible songwriting, something about Jarvis's personality in that incredibly tight band, and something about the songs just all coalesced. And suddenly, if we have Britpop to thank for anything, it's that this band who might have just absolutely disappeared became, one of the biggest bands in Britain, and certainly one of the best bands in Britain. So with Suede disqualified, my number 1 Britpop band is Pulp.
Well, I very much approve those choices.
Would you have a view on that? You haven't thought it through, have you? You're not going to know your colours to the Britpop mast.
I would have definitely had Pulp and Elastica in there. I'll come back to you next week. I would have definitely had Pulp and... Well, actually, I would have put Suede in there. So there we go. We've covered everything. I also wouldn't have put Oasis in.
No, listen, and I like Oasis, but there's something about Britpop that to me has a bit more of an edge to it. That's the Britpop that I love. That's us done, I think.
I think it is, regrettably, but we will definitely be back on Tuesday.
Definitely. Well, listen, you never say definitely, can you? For sure. But God willing...
Everything points to the fact that we will.
Yes,
see you next Tuesday.
We'll see you next Tuesday.